So this session is around IRA as it relates to the C&I and utility space. So for those of you who got the program and are looking at it, we're excited to get this panel started. And I know if you've also attended the original panel around the IRA overview, some of this might be a bit duplicative, but we're going to get into some greater details as the IRA relates to C&I, utility scale space, and how to apply this for your business. So
we should probably make the same deal with them too, which is interrupt at any time if you have questions.
Please, please ask questions. We got some really smart people up here, so want to give everybody the maximum opportunity to dive into questions as it relates, even if it's like super specific scenarios around your business or a project, like rather do that than just do another IRA overview. So anyway, but we'll go ahead and get started. So I really want to just kind of go down the line, and I'd love to just start with you guys reintroducing yourself. I know, again, we just did the IRA overview. My name's Morgan. I work with a group here called ESA. We're a developer and EPC firm. We work in the C&I space, and we develop larger utility scale projects across the country. So I'll be moderating the panel and looking forward to providing some context around the C&I and utility scale market. So hand it off to Brandon.
Thanks. Brandon Nodap from Jinko Solar. I worked for CIA National for a bunch of years, and I go back to the Hill where I worked on EPACT 05, which is the George W. Bush bill that was referred to during Heather's talk this morning.
Great. I'm David Skillman. I'm from Sonova Energy. Sonova is an energy as a service provider. We've had a big history in rooftop solar. We are just now moving into the commercial space. Sonova also provides a lot of accessory products like load controllers, heat pumps, HVACs, things like that. I will probably be a little bit quieter in this session, just given that Sonova doesn't have a huge presence in the commercial space, and also given that I just ate a ton of red velvet cake. But yeah, I'm happy to contribute where I can.
Great, thank you. My name's Chris Diaz. I'm with Seminole Financial Services, and we provide financing, debt and tax equity for solar transactions, 1 megawatt to 40 to 50 megawatts.
Cool. Awesome. So when I think about like the makeup of how you guys are thinking about your business, I think like Chris, I'm sure for you there's been huge changes. Obviously, I think for a lot of folks that we speak to, resi, C&I, utility scale, everybody kind of describes the IRA as almost like jet fuel for their business, and everybody has been feeling that momentum. And so I think, and maybe David, you already kind of said it for Sonova, but I'd love to hear from you, Brandon, and from you, Chris, like how has already the IRA from a commercial perspective, accelerated your business? What are some of that momentum that you guys are feeling?
So, from our perspective, it's been a long time coming. We've been wanting to have this nice long runway from our business. Now we're outsourcing additional sources of capital so we can meet the needs of our existing clients and the new clients. We have a very healthy pipeline. Again, we do stuff all over the country. We're based in Tampa Bay area, but we do stuff all over the country, and just the amount of phone calls and emails that we're getting from people that are really doing a lot of development around the country, a lot of community solar. We don't really do a lot of large utility scale stuff, so it's more of this kind of C&I, but people feel good about what the opportunity is, and we know we have at least a 30% investment tax credit, which worked fine before. So now the deals just got better, more profitable, or allows you to be more competitive through various ways of structuring the deal. So it has definitely been rocket fuel, and we're just in the beginning of the first inning on this. So as we get the guidance, as things continue along, kind of finding the path forward, I think next year in 24 and in 25, we're going to see some really significant increases of deals getting done around the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as some of you know, we manufacture or we assemble panels in Jacksonville. So in terms of direct considerations, we're considering expansions there. We're definitely seeing or hearing a lot of questions about domestic content, and if Jinko Technology is going to qualify for that. The answer is we don't know. Nor does anybody else for that matter. But we're all anxiously waiting on that, because that's an extra 10% for the ultimate investor. That's going to be big for manufacturers across the board. I would say, though, in general, because other things sort of dovetail into this, the other things that have been discussed at this conference, whether it's state policy or trade, supply chain issues, customs stuff. So it always amazes me, though, how resilient the industry is, how we grow despite all these headwinds, including the CRA fight that's been going on that hopefully dies tonight. So strong days ahead, and if we didn't have so many headwinds and we had more certainty on the tax side, I would think it would be even better.
I can also just chime in here. Rocket Fuel is right, both because of the 10-year runway on the tax credits that we've been talking about, but also from a lot of the other provisions in the IRA that we kind of glossed over during the beginning of the last session. Sunnova is looking to build partnerships, build systems for Indian tribes, which are eligible for this grant money from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program. Sunnova is looking to develop partnerships and pursue building systems with rural developers. We talked about the REAP, the Renewable Energy for America program. It's a $1.7 billion program. They provide up to $1 million per project in grant money to rural small business owners. So there's a big, and ag producers. There's a lot of opportunities there to get grant money. And then I think the third piece for us, the third fuel in the rocket fuel mix is that the IRA gave DOE's Loan Programs Office additional backstop authority. So Sunnova, recently made headlines. We announced an agreement with, it's still being finalized, but an agreement with the LPO, the Loan Programs Office, where they're going to backstop up to $3 billion worth of our residential loans right now. And that's in an effort to get Sunnova to pursue lower credit score customers. And they're backstopping those loans because Sunnova packages them up into a securitization, and then those securitizations, which have lower FICO loans in them, but have the benefit of this backstop, now can earn a better rate in the securities market. So that's a huge help to us that doesn't really make everyday people aren't seeing those kinds of headlines.
Yeah, and just kind of tagging on some of these governmental programs. So REAP, in addition to the grant program, there's a REAP loan program that's a fully amortizing 20, 25, 30-year loan. So those loans, and again, you can go on their site and look up if where you're doing the project, if you're in a zip code or an area that qualifies, but if it does, then that opens you up to longer term financing, even if you only have like a power purchase agreement for 15 years or 20 years. We'll look at a merchant tail to help get you those additional years on the fully amortizing mortgage. So that's helpful in the capital stack of getting more long-term debt. DOE also has kind of emerging technologies programs, so they'll look at hydrogen, basically anything except straightforward, just a solar deal. If you have solar plus storage or anything plus storage, there's a lot of different scenarios that would get you to qualify under some of the DOE loan programs that they have as well. And it's a lot of money, and everybody's trying to get the money out the door. In Florida, there's and I don't know enough about the program, but if you're working with co-ops, there's a USDA program that works with co-ops that I think allows some kind of debt that only the co-ops can get. Am I saying that right? Or yeah. So if you're approaching a co-op here in the state of Florida to own the system and you build it for them, then you tie in the USDA loan with them. Plus now they can utilize the tax credits. So it's all very positive, and those are just some ways just specific to the state that you can do stuff right here in the state.
Can I say that I know we're throwing around a lot of different individual programs, and it might be confusing if you're hearing some of these for the first time. As far as the federal provisions of the IRA that create grant or loan opportunities, there is a great resource on the White House's website. It's called the IRA Guidebook, and it's just a digest. Instead of looking through the 700-page statute for all these individual programs, there's a digest that says what's the program, what's the section of the IRA that it's from, who's eligible to participate, what are the terms. It's real simple, and it's a great resource.
We have a website as well that's sort of the same thing. You can type in IRA and rural development, and it should come up to our part that breaks down the.
Oh, nice.
Excellent. That's awesome.
Was there a question like right up here? Did you have?
I had a question for you. Like, part of the hesitancy of doing anything, or you don't want to speak before you really know what's going to happen. So how long till this kind of coalesces where you can speak with confidence when you're talking to a potential client or customer?
Well, so like those programs that I mentioned, if you're going after a co-op, that program with USDA exists right now. The REAP loan program exists right now. The direct pay or how the co-ops are going to be able to utilize the tax credits probably still need some guidance, but you could at least get the conversation started.
Like even the domestic content thing, when that?
Well, we're hoping,
Probably end of June is when, or early June is when we're going to see domestic content guidance.
yeah, I would say sometime between now and sometime in July.
So part of this, where we're at right now, is like we have the structure, right? We have the framework of how the IRA is going to impact the commercial market. But as guidance comes out from the Treasury, things become more clear, right? We start to understand some of these structurings more. We're able to develop more structures around that. But if you have a business right now and you're an installer or you're a sales organization, you're thinking, how do I go in front of my customers and start having these conversations? As you start modeling some of these projects for financials and you're showing your customer how they can buy this, you know all of the percentages and you know that framework as it exists today. And so then the questions start to become bringing in, tax counsel and support when deals get a little bit more complicated, which I'm sure Chris has been on many, more complicated transactions. But
Also, not to give you all homework, but even when the guidance comes out, if it doesn't work for you, especially on the more technical side, technical tweaks that would make it work, but even just philosophically, like domestic content's a mess, whatever, be active, complain loudly. That's if you remember the commenced construction guidance Solar got in 2018, there were like half a dozen revisions to that between then and now. So we had a lot of bites at that apple.
yeah. So
Send those complaints to your email?
Wendy, and then she'll probably
Jinko,
forward it.
General Inquiry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's take a step back really quick, because I know we want to focus in this panel around C&I. And so, I've sat at kitchen tables in resi, and I've sat at boardroom tables in commercial. And so part of the challenge that we have as a solar industry now is that if you're in front of customers, you have to spend the time understanding everything that we're talking about with the IRA so you can properly communicate it with the customer, right? And so, the commercial side of this, or the business IRA, has a lot more subsets. But I think that one thing that we can kind of do to simplify this a little bit for this discussion is that when we think about the IRA and the adder structure, so we have that base 30%, and then we have these additional 10% adders, two of which are really based on the location of the project, right? So that's your energy community, and that's your LMI, right? So if we put those aside, those are things that you can't control in your business, right? Unless you're going after projects in those specific zones. Those are additional credits that exist, and specifically LMI is something that has a cap that you'll need to apply for. So where you can control it within your business is thinking about, A, how do I partner with companies like Jinko Solar or other US-based module manufacturers and assemblers that I can hopefully tap into domestic content and give that to my sales force? And then also, how can I make sure I understand the apprenticeship requirements so that as your workforce, if they're installers, you're able to go after those projects that are over a megawatt, right? And so I think I'd love to dive in a little bit more. I think about if we start on the smaller projects, so anything that's under 1 megawatt AC, we don't have to worry about apprenticeship requirements for current guidance. So if I'm thinking about domestic content right now, maybe from you, Brandon, and Sonova, perhaps like, if I'm trying to get my business in a way that I should start quoting the right products, or I should start, communicating this to my clients, how should we be thinking about domestic content right now?
I defer to you as a buyer.
You have to be very wary. I think there's not really much certainty you can give your clients right now. I think you can just let them know that we are advocating for as lenient a position as possible. To just very briefly recap, sorry if this is repetitive for those of you in the second session here, but my view of the text of the statute for this bonus, which again is only available for the commercial tax credit, which is what everyone here cares about, that if you can assemble US-made manufactured products on your system that collectively cost about 40% of the total cost of that system, then you should be eligible for that 10% bonus. I mean, that makes sense to me, and that's without regard to where the pieces that go into those components come from. However, I think that reasonable interpretation, which is the interpretation that SEIA has been advocating for since day one, could very well be not likely to carry the day. And there could be more restrictive versions of the domestic content adder that make it more or less impossible to get within the first couple years, which I think would run afoul of the legislative intent. I think it would run afoul of the legislative text. I think it would run afoul of the Federal Trade Administration regulations that the IRA cites for guidance on how this bonus is supposed to work. For now, I think we just have to tell our clients, we don't know what's going to happen. We're probably going to get guidance in the next month or two, but I would not advocate making a gamble here. We had a question, we have two questions over here.
So when we're talking to a customer about this, so we're talking about 4% of the cost of the contract, or we're talking about 4% of the cost of materials?
Well,
Go ahead.
I don't want to give people advice per se, but I'll tell you my thoughts on that is I would not try to sell someone on domestic content right now, because while the general opinion is that it could come out this way, it may not. And if you go in and start talking about, oh, I think this is what's going to happen, and then you get thrown a curveball like what happened with the LMI, like no one was thinking that for the LMI adder that it was going to be an application, that there was going to be a limited amount to it, that there was a timing when you could place it in service. All those were just added on that it wasn't even in the conversation. So I just caution everyone on go with what you know. So we know we have guidance on like energy communities right now, okay? If you're talking to your client, if you can make the deal work without the adders, the deal's even better with the adders. The return to them, their return on cash, if they're looking at a 5 or 7 year return and you get this extra adder, then that's going to expedite that, and it could go from 7 years to 5 years or 5 years to 3 years, because now you're going to get this additional kicker of tax credits, which comes in at the end, not the beginning, and then their debt's going to be smaller, so they're going to keep more of the cash flow coming off, or the system really costs them less to build, if we're talking specifically in Florida and someone's owning that system. So then the investment that they make and then their savings in the power, they'll get that back quicker because there's less debt that they have to service on it. And so that's how I would look at it in selling to these people. Because if you go in there and start telling them, oh, we think it's going to be this, we think it's going to be that, it confuses the conversation. And like if you're just starting now to have conversations with people, like, and I'm not a developer, I don't know how people go and source their deals, but I would imagine you're going to go in and say, hey, if I could save you money on your power bill, would you be interested in a solar system? And then the answer is probably yes. So the first thing you're going to want to get is what's your energy usage, and you're going to go through. That's going to take you a couple of months to get all that information together, and then hopefully by the, again, June, July sometime, we'll have a guidance. And then if you haven't started putting numbers into the deal and what it would look like, then you'll be able to do that. But if you've shown them some preliminary numbers and the deal still looks good, now the deal just got a whole lot better.
100% agree. Don't think anyone should be pitching anybody on this adder at the moment. I'm also very happy to have an academic discussion with you afterwards about how the calculation, I think, should actually be performed. But it would be academic, and I think that there's too much uncertainty to really rely on anything. Did you want to respond? We have another question.
A couple questions here.
What's the definition of a 1 megawatt AC project? Is it per property address, per meter, per interconnect?
It's just per project. It's 1 megawatt DC, and it's the nameplate capacity of any given project.
What's the definition of a project? What if if you're on a site and it's got 10 different locations on the same property address, but they got 10 different meters too?
Phases?
This is a good question.
I think current guidance right now, so it is less than 1 megawatt AC. We're still waiting on guidance on this as well, because as of right now, what we can lean on is that if you have a single owner who's owning multiple projects that equal greater than 1 megawatt AC on the same parcel, that likely is going to be looked at as greater than 1 megawatt AC. So there's definitely a challenge that comes up there. Yeah, Steve.
First part is AC or DC?
AC.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
AC, so usually about 85% or so of what the DC is.
Yeah.
Second part, production tax credit. Remind me or remind us when that qualifies. Do you take one over the other, or do you have to split it?
Yeah, that might be a good one to jump into. I don't know, Chris, if you want to jump in on production tax credit versus.
Well, I would say that you have to pick which one you're going to use. I don't think you can go, oh, I want to do this or do that. The investment tax credit is based off the cost of the transaction. It's a one-time credit, and you get that basically, all that investment will come in when you convert from construction to permanent loan. After the deal's been placed in service, the investor's capital usually comes in. On the production tax credit, it's based on production over 10 years.
10 years.
And excuse me, because I haven't done, it's similar to the investment tax credit. I haven't done tax credit since 2006, those kind of tax credits. So I'm not really all the way up to speed on the production tax credit, but it's over a period of time. And do the investors' money come in, that comes in as cash flow in the model, or will they have some money that comes in up front when the deal closes? Do you guys know?
I don't know the answer to that.
So I haven't seen its structure yet.
You have to pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Plus depreciation, or you'll get the production plus depreciation.
That's correct. You got to pick which one, though, at the time you play. I think it's at the time you place it in service.
Do you know if it's going to be something like the Rex, where you kind of got a reporting or something, or how that would?
Well, it's just based off, oh, Tony, yeah.
Yeah, so you basically, so the way
Expert.
the PTC program
Get up here,
generally works is that on a quarterly, monthly, quarterly, or annual, whatever you agree to with your investor, okay?
Right.
You'll get you'll do some sort of certification of how much power was produced during that time period.
Right.
Okay? And that certification, there's no law on what form that certification has to be. It's negotiating that with your investor, but you agree with your investor how you're going to certify production, and then you submit that certification to your investor, and then they will, basically give you some portion of capital for them. The way the PTC program works generally is your investor is going to give you most of your capital commitment upfront, and then a tail, some sort of tail, as you prove how much power was actually produced. You follow me?
Right, so you're not going to get this from Uncle Sam.
Depends if you want to sell the credit or if you're going to get an investment.
Got it.
Okay, what's your plan? Is your plan to sell it?
Got it. Well, we're looking at how to shape it. So, how do you best sell it? How do you sell it to the buyer? For their system.
Okay, so if you transfer tax credit, if you're going to try and sell ETC,
Right.
as of right now, okay, you probably wait until your year is over so you can prove how much credit you have and be able to report on the tax return. My gut tells me that ultimately that the IRS is going to give you some sort of special form when you
Hey, so Tony, if, like, just kind of a scenario, if it's a PTC structure, would they potentially give you, they'll look at the production for 10 years, figure out what the value of that is, and then maybe give you 70%, 50% up front, and then the rest kind of comes out?
Yep, so that's all negotiated. How much they give you up front is a negotiation with your investor. Usually most tax advisors want the investor to give them at least 75% of that future commitment, of that future production.
Yep.
And then the balance is paid over time as like what they call pay-go structure.
Pay-go?
Pay-go, because the investor's nervous that maybe the system's going to underproduce, and so they hold back some of the commitment because of the uncertainty around the production.
And would that 25% come in like annually, or will they spread it out where it's a couple years?
Most sponsors would like it on a quarterly basis.
A quarterly.
Right, and so that definitely comes down to negotiation. You know, basically, the more the equity the investor puts upfront, they pay in lower, and the more they get to pay in as a pay-go over time, they pay a higher
A premium.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and this is Tony Grapponi with Novogradac, a national accounting firm, and Tony's very knowledgeable and always a good resource for me when I have questions. So thank you for sitting in and answering.
And certainly these are, you know, a lot of what we're talking about with the PTC is structured around what Tony's describing as investor-owned models. So those of you guys that are sitting at the table and you're trading cash for an installation contract, you know, these are things that also have to be evaluated with your customer and their tax counsel, because as you guys I'm sure are aware, it's totally different from one customer to the next, right? And so, you know, there's going to be financial changes that come based on the structuring of these deals.
Yeah.
You know,
One point I wanted to kind of catch up on that I remembered when we were talking about energy communities and how that would relate here to Florida. We talked about earlier that there's some spots where there are closed coal mines or coal facilities. That the other part we really didn't dive too big into is cap landfills. So that's an opportunity to go to a city, like we did a deal in Massachusetts where the city was paying for the cap landfill. It was costing them a couple $100,000 a year to maintain it, to cut it, to do all the stuff that they have to do with it. A developer came in, proposed doing a deal on the cap landfill. So he signed a lease with the city, and then he had an agreement to sell the power to the city. So it went from a cost of like $200,000 a year for the city to like a $300,000 swing. They were like saving $100,000 by the time they factored in the power and the maintenance and all that stuff. In Florida, you can't sell them the power, but you could partner with them to build a system for them, and then they own the system. And that's another way that as a developer in the state of Florida that you could try to go expand your business, looking at, you know, where are the cap landfills, go talk to the cities. If the city has money to do it, or if you're in a municipality or you're in an area that has a co-op that's providing the power, then you might be able to work out some kind of agreement with the PPA with the co-op, and then they sell the city the power. So there's some creative ways. You know, Florida is limited by our laws, which are kind of unique to Florida. In fact, we may be the, I don't know of any other states that don't allow for power purchase agreements, but we might be the only one. If not, there's only a handful that there are.
It's the number 2 solar state despite itself.
yeah. So, okay, so we kind of covered domestic content. I think the answer for you guys is like, don't do anything yet. Don't say anything yet on domestic content. So maybe David, like on Sunnova's side, you think about your installer partners. If we're thinking about over a megawatt AC and we know we're going to trigger apprenticeship requirements and we're also going to need prevailing wage requirements, what do we understand as of today from guidance that's come out of how we should be thinking about that from a construction standpoint? What documentation, what should we be preparing to be ready for apprenticeship requirements if we're doing these large projects?
Yeah, so the good news is we do have guidance on this already, at least some preliminary guidance from Treasury. And the deal is this, you have to, on any project that's over nameplate 1 megawatt AC, in order to get that increased base. Remember before I said it starts at, if you're at over a megawatt, the base is actually 6% investment tax credit, and then it gets bumped up to 30 if you meet these prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. To ensure that you get that 30% ITC, you have to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So what are those? Well, prevailing wage is determined by going to the Department of Labor's website. There's a website, the URL is sam.gov, sam.gov, and there you can find for any different category of laborer or mechanic. By the way, yeah, let me back up just a sec and say the prevailing wage requirements only apply to laborers and mechanics on the project. So that would include people doing the actual installation, the electrical, the electricians, the engineers. It does not apply to people in a supervisory role, like a foreman, an executive, an owner. So you go to sam.gov, you find the prevailing wage statistics. Unfortunately, there is no category of solar installer across the country.
Which is infuriating.
There will be one day, right? But until that time comes, you're going to have to make some guesses sometimes. And you look at so you go to sam.gov, you look at the geographic area, you pick the category of laborer or mechanic that you have, and you get the prevailing wage. Sorry?
Are you sure of the website?
It might be like DOL.gov, Sam? But
Yeah, Sam.
Some combination of that.
sam.gov.
Is it?
But then if you have questions, yeah, let me just confirm here. Yeah, if you have questions about whether or not, I mean, there may be like a little pull down within it. If you have questions, like maybe you're not sure which category your laborers fall into, because there isn't this, national solar installer category yet, you can email DOL, Department of Labor, and there's a website called IRA prevailing wage at DOL.gov, and you email them and you have to say, here's my issue, here's the category of labor that I think I have, here's the prevailing wage that I think I should be able to use, and you have to justify it. You can't just ask an open-ended question. And my understanding is that they're actually pretty responsive to these emails. But that is the process for determining the prevailing wage. And then you have to log all of the project hours, all of the labor hours on the project, and who worked on the project, how many hours, what wage you paid them, what category of labor you gave to them, and you have to maintain these documents. For the apprenticeship requirements, there is a requirement that a certain portion of the labor hours on the project be performed by apprentices that you obtain through a registered apprenticeship program. So in Florida,
Flosia has one, right?
yeah, we have one. I forget the exact name of it, the Florida Solar Apprenticeship Program, I think. So those apprenticeship numbers change over time. I think they're 12.5% of the total labor hours in 2023 must come from registered apprentices, and that jumps up to 15% next year.
Yeah.
Now, there is a safe harbor. If you reach out to a state registered apprenticeship program, you say, I need an apprentice on my job, and they either tell you we don't have any at this time, or 5 business days goes by and they don't respond to you, you have a safe harbor. You are no longer required to meet the apprenticeship requirements for that project, but you must keep a record of that request to the apprenticeship program. There's one other rule, which is that if you are employing at least 4 people, you must have at least 1 apprentice on a project that you're employing. So those are fairly burdensome requirements, but again, this is only for above 1 megawatt AC projects.
So there's still further guidance needed on a lot of this, right? Seasonal work, a lot of your guys' staffs, I'm sure, change based on the month. especially that, around that de minimis area. I would also say that you know, a lot of it's going to be either like electrician, labor, or carpenter, some version of that. It's going to take sort of industry pressure to get a solar classification. The other classifications have the benefit of labor unions who lobby in DC to like maintain these classifications and push for them and make sure that they're fairly paid and all the things that go along with that. There is no solar union in that sense. So it would sort of be created from whole cloth. So this kind of needs to start locally and work its way back up to Washington.
So if we're looking at these projects, you know, let's say that we're working on a municipality project. Let's say that someone bid and it's greater than a megawatt AC and they're trying to take direct pay, or perhaps it's a private company. Right now, for your workforce, it sounds like keep really good logs of all the hours for everyone during construction. We want to make sure that we're also reaching out for apprenticeship in the state of Florida or other states, you know, per that guidance. And it sounds like take a lot of good document prep classes, make sure everything is good. Is that pretty good guidance for everybody right now from what we know?
Yeah, again, keeping track of total hours worked.
Yeah.
Keeping track of how many hours each employee worked, what wages they were paid, and maintaining those records.
Cool.
I should know this. What's the man hours on a 1 megawatt project? Like 10,000?
Depends on the project.
Yeah, 5,000?
Yeah.
So that's, get ready for some paperwork,
And obviously keep records of what you paid everybody too.
Yeah.
because there are penalties.
If you do the Florida apprenticeship program, is that reciprocal with other states?
I know, I've heard this question asked before. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't have the answer.
I think it has to be registered in that state.
Oh, I think we have a question over here as well.
Just a question on laborers. Various people use different laborers for different projects. We have some roofers that got into the mechanical side, electricians do the DC AC side, steel workers do canopies, carports, round mounts. Where's the guidance there on what classification to use for labor?
It does not get into the specifics.
Different pay rates, right?
Sorry?
You could use a carpenter.
Right. What happens when you use a carpenter to perform another function, right? I don't have the answer for that. Again, the only, I think the guidance clearly anticipated this is a problem, but they did not come up with the solution for it yet. And so instead what they decided was, well, where we have lack of clarity into how to identify someone, you just have to email this website. And I want to repeat, you don't just email them and say, what do I do here? You make your case. You have to say, this is the worker, this is the type of work he's doing, this is what I think I should, this is what I think the prevailing wage should be. You're asking permission basically and justifying it.
Interesting. Other questions? I think we're getting pretty close to time, so I want to open up as many questions as possible.
As far as home-based businesses, do a portion of them, like of your home, does it count for Section 48 and another portion for the residential credit? Is there any, do you have anything to make that a CPA question?
So
So if you work from home,
Yeah.
it's a home-based business, is there a portion of the commercial credit or not?
I would be very nervous about doing that. I don't think,
So if you have a home-based business, you qualify for a portion of it to be the
If Tony doesn't know, it doesn't exist.
Are you talking about trying to capitalize on your home office costs?
Well, yeah, and let's say they invest an extra 10%, you get the other 10% back as it comes in.
That's a pretty unique question. Maybe we talk online about
You go with whatever rate plans on the meter.
Right.
Become a Novograttic client.
Sorry, I think Steve had a question and we had one more.
Actually, not a question. I think you're referring to the Davis-Bacon Act.
it's related. So Davis-Bacon Act is a set of rules, it's a series of acts that says if you get government money for a public project, a project that's in the public interest, you have to pay prevailing wage and labor. And that, I think, in large part is why DOL keeps these records. This is It's not, I mean, they don't say that this is a Davis-Bacon related act. It's slightly different because we're not necessarily using government funds here for public projects.
That was the
These are,
philosophy, though.
yeah, but it's tied to the same prevailing wage standard, yes.
A tax credit is considered government money for these, I mean, philosophically, as they made this law. Yeah.
Sure.
Does that require them to be ADA compliant?
Is it ADA compliant?
Americans with Disability Act.
I have not heard anyone mention that. What would that look like on a,
Yeah, it's open to the public. You gotta have equal access for somebody with a disability.
Yeah.
well, yeah, but it's not really, it's not like a publicly accessible place. I don't know the answer to that, but
We've had projects get canceled because they treat that as a renovation to a building. If you're doing anything solar, but it's a renovation and the building's ADA is not up to code, you have to bring the ADA up to code. And, some old buildings, it gets super expensive, they'll cancel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not fun. Other questions? I think we missed one somewhere. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just one of the other questions made, wonder, I looked up with a guy with a bunch of Airbnbs, with solar on all of his Airbnb, is that a commercial project? Or is that a series of residential?
It's an income generating.
I think that's I think that, is it a purely income generating property?
Yeah, and I think it'd be commercial.
I think there's a good case to be made. I wouldn't want to tell you one way or another, but I think if it's a depreciable asset, that's really the question. Are you taking this? Are you able to depreciate this asset as part of a business? And if you are, then yeah, commercial.
Yeah, and certainly there.
But I'm not answering your question, to be clear. And I'm not
I
your
did not
lawyer.
provide guidance. Yeah.
Hire Tony.
Now there's a lot of ideas floating around in the room. The same could go for multifamily too, where there's an opportunity here for multifamily to claim in these commercial tax credits. And so, also from like a residential installer base, if you are doing primarily residential, multifamily is a great opportunity to be able to tap into these credits, as well as, I don't know if one of you guys want to explain the low income benefit project piece of the 20% LMI section. Does anyone want to take that?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Talked about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it might be beneficial if you guys are thinking about how to jump into multifamily as well. Any other questions? I think we're just about at time.
There's a lot for the bill in CNI. So, I mean, I guess one could argue it might be the most benefited segment of the industry, possibly because so many things overlap.
Yeah.
So, I hope everyone do your homework, hire a good tax accountant. There's a lot in there for you.
Yeah.
This was a really great audience, and I hate being stumped so much on stage, but it's evidence of a good discussion, so thank you, guys.
Yeah, so big takeaways, it sounds like, apprenticeship requirements, we got that. More documentation. If we think about domestic content, don't do anything yet, and follow the framework as it is for now, and continue to check back with Treasury guidance as we all wait to see how it unfolds for the C&I market. But I totally agree, lots of opportunity and some really good deals are going to come out of this in the coming years. So cool. All right, thank you
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.